Hello and welcome back to another episode of Your Family Lawyer, which is reaching you from the Family Lawyers. And we are here in the western part of Nigeria. And we have offices in North Central, in the East, Southeast, and in the South South. And also, we have affiliations with law offices in the Northwest and Northeast, right? However, today I'm speaking to you from the ancient and modern city of Ibadan. What I do here on every episode of Your Family Lawyer, which happens every Tuesday at this particular time, is to educate people and orient people on family law, like the Nigerian family law. I see people who get to say many things about Nigerian family law, and I'm wondering, like, where did you hear that from? Where did you get that from? Part today, someone still posted something on Facebook, and I was wondering, like, is it that they did not teach me that particular law, or what is it about? So, your family lawyer is designed to actually help you understand Nigeria law, understand the processes of anything you want to do in Nigeria family law, and so that you can make well-informed decisions, right? But it is not professional advice. So if you need professional advice, if you have any professional legal question issue that you want to handle, I will suggest that you contact a lawyer that is close to you, or you can use the details on this particular episode to reach out to me. Today, we still had, as our office had two family law matters in court today, and tomorrow we are still going to be attending to some. In fact, before I came live this evening, I had to prepare documents for another one, another family law matter, and we filed it before 4 p.m. But we are grateful to God we were able to meet up with that deadline. However, today I'm going to be discussing with you the legal requirements for a valid statutory marriage. Right, so if you say you have a statutory marriage or you want to have a statutory marriage, what I'll be sharing today happen to be the legal requirements for a valid statutory marriage. You may ask, what is a statutory marriage? Now, a statutory marriage is a marriage that is based on the Marriage Act. Remember that last week we started the series learning the Marriage Act. So we're actually learning the Marriage Act that regulates statutory marriage in Nigeria. Or you may want to say that regulates civil marriage in Nigeria. Does it mean that Sharia, Islamic marriages, customary marriages are not regulated by statutes? They are also regulated by statutes, but we generally don't call them statutory marriages. And besides, the applications are not universal to Nigeria. But the Marriage Act, for example, is universal to every part of Nigeria. Which marriage is under the Marriage Act? Which type of marriage would I say is a statutory marriage? Now, the simple way I tell people is any marriage that the marriage certificate carries the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the Marriage Act. So if your certificate carries the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the Marriage Act, if you can see that anywhere in your wedding certificate, in your marriage certificate, it means that you are married under the Marriage Act. It means that you have a statutory marriage. Right now, where can you have the statutory marriage? You can have it in a licensed and registered place of worship, right? You can have it at the marriage registry. I know when they say marriage registry, some people actually think it is court. It's not a court, right? You are not doing a court process. It's not a court procedure. It's a formal procedure at the marriage registry, right? So the marriage registry, people call it court marriage, or we call it registry marriage, or we just simply call it statutory marriage, or we can also call it a marriage under the Act. You can have this marriage. You can have it, like I said, at a center that is licensed and registered for marriage, and as also at the marriage registry. Now, another place where you can have it is at a place where the governor has license for marriage. So if the governor has licensed a place for marriage, you can have your statutory marriage there. So let's go straight into today's conversation, because there are some questions I want to answer. I want to answer who can marry, like who can marry, what is the capacity a person needs to be able to marry, that the person needs to consent to be able to marry, what's the minimum age and the legal implications if you don't meet the minimum age. When you want to marry, what processes should you go into? What are the notices that you are supposed to file? how you can file objections if need be, because yes, you can file objections. For example, you know that your spouse wants to get married under the Marriage Act, you can file an objection to it. It may not be your spouse, maybe someone else that you know that is already married. You can snitch on the person, you can file an objection, ensuring that that person does not commit bigamy, that that person does not contract another marriage while the person's first marriage is still existing. So let's delve straight into today's conversation: who can marry? Right. So if we're looking at who can marry, we want to realize. I want to realize that before you can marry under the Marriage Act, before you can marry at a marriage registry, there is a basic, or we'll say a minimum legal capacity that you ought to have. So we want to understand that number one, that you are single, right? Number one is that you are single, you are not married to another person. And what we mean not married to another person, it means you are not married to another person under any form of marriage. I mean, if you are married to somebody under customary law, you cannot marry another person under the Marriage Act. If you are married to one person under Islamic marriage, ordinarily you are not supposed to be able to marry another person under the Marriage Act unless you are first of all divorced the first person you were married to. So for you to be able to have a statutory marriage, you need to be single. So single here means that you need to be single under all the different forms of marriage, unless of course the person you want to marry under the Marriage Act is the same person that you married under another form of law or practice. So you must be single, you must be of sound mind, right? So you must be of sound mind. It means that you are not suffering any mental health challenges that affects your cognitivity of decision making. So you don't come up to say, I married out of error, I did not know what I was doing. So you want to be of sound mind, right? And we want a situation where you are able to consent freely. Like when we're talking about consenting freely, there are several ways consent works, and you will see how that applies. So if you are getting married under the Marriage Act, we want to know that you are actually choosing to marry this person. You are not being forced to marry this person. You want to marry this person and you are agreeing with it. Now, for you to be able to consent, there's a minimum age of marriage that is required. So let's go there. Under customary law, for example, you have to be 18 years old before you can marry. In most of the states in Nigeria, apart from those states where you can marry under Islamic law and you may be able to marry under 18, but generally 18 is adulthood in Nigeria. So for you to say you are getting married under any law in Nigeria, you need to be 18 years. Interestingly, when it comes to the Marriage Act, the process is a little bit different. So if you are 18 years old under the Marriage Act, you cannot marry without your parents' consent. So only if an 18 years old or a 19 years old or a 20 years old comes up now and say, I want to get married, the law says that you can only get married with your parents' consent. So either your father's consent, or in the case where your father is not alive, your mother's consent, or in the place where your mother is not alive, your guardian's consent, or any other person who has the power to give you consent, right? Who has power over you. So if you are 18, is not just when it comes to marriage in Nigeria, 18 is not adulthood actually, right? However, there are two places where there's absolute adulthood. So 18 is not absolute adulthood because you still need the consent of your parent or your guardian. However, if you are already married under the custom Islamic law, you already have an Islamic marriage, or you already you are an adult. Before you can marry under the Marriage Act, you need to be 18 years old. And once you're 18 years old, you need the consent of your parents. However, if you are 21 years old, you don't need the consent of anybody to marry. But between 18 and 21, you need the consent of your parent or of your guardian to be able to marry, right? So that's how that applies. However, if you are married by any other means, I mean, if you have married any other person, right? You have married any other person and you are married to any other person under customer, you are married to someone under customary law or under uh, Islamic law, Islamic practice, the law says you're automatically an adult. So you will not be needing consent of any other person to be able to marry again. So you must understand this principle very well. So 18 to 20 needs consent of a parent or needs consent of a guardian, but 21 years old and above does not need the consent of anybody. Now, if a person is less than 21 years old, but the person already has a customary marriage or the person already has an Islamic marriage, that person does not need the consent of any person to marry. The person can give the consent himself, right? So that's the capacity for you to say, I am consenting to a statutory marriage in Nigeria. Okay, now let's assume you want to get married in Nigeria. How do you go about it? The law says it's very simple, that from the day you want to marry, from the day you if you want to marry, you should give the minimum of 21 days notice. So 21 days notice means that you are going to the marriage registry or you are going to the religious place of worship, maybe a church where you want to do that marriage, and you are going to fill a notice form, right? So you fill a notice form telling people to display it on the notice boards, people that, hey, I want to get married and I want to get married to this particular person. The reason why you have to do this is so that you can give people the opportunity for them to file an objection, like for them to be able to know that, oh, in case they have anything to say, for you go to churches and you see people, they lift up their hands and they say things like, no, the priest will usually ask if there's any person here who has any reason why these two people may not be joined together in holy matrimony. You may right now lift up your hands, you may speak now or forever remain silent, right? Now, you cannot actually do that under the Marriage Act. The Marriage Act says that you have 21 days to do that. So 21 days, they are supposed to publish this marriage, the notice of this marriage. And any person who has an objection has to come within these 21 days to be able to file that objection. Now, if you have an objection and you file it, now from the moment you file it, and if after 21 days nobody's objecting to the marriage registrar or the priest or whoever is authorized in that church is supposed to now issue you, right, a document of authority giving you the power to say now you cannot marry. And from the day it gives you that power, you have 3 months to get married. I've seen some people, one of the ways I know if people have a fake marriage, because fake marriages are very common, especially with the Japa syndrome. One of the ways I know if somebody has a fake marriage is to ask them, okay, when did you go to the marriage registry to file your notice of marriage? And many times they're like, they never did that. And come on, the moment you never did that, I'm already suspecting that, whoa, something must be wrong, because you ought to do that. You necessarily have to do that. The 21 days. Okay, now let's see. What if somebody has an objection to your marriage, or you are the one that has an objection to someone else's marriage? So they are stating objection, stating the reason why you are objecting. So instead that you are saying, oh, this person that wants to get married is already married to another person, or this person is underage, right? Or I believe that there is no consent, that either they are forcing the man or they are forcing the girl, the lady. Or for example, maybe the people are related by blood. And so those are some of the reasons why you don't want them to get married. Interestingly, that objection does not just end there, because the marriage registrar would have to take it before a magistrate, a family court magistrate, to actually hear the case, to know if your objection is valid, to know if your objection should be upheld, should be sustained, or should be overruled, right? So these are some of the things you need to know regarding marriage. Regarding the legal requirements for getting married. Now, are there still other things that you need to know? Yes, there are still other things that you need to know. I cannot share everything today, so I'll be inviting you to join me next week, Tuesday, at the same time on the same platform for us to take it further. Because that time we'll be looking at the marriage formalities under the Marriage Act. Today, what we considered was just the legal requirements for a valid statutory marriage. So we're talking about your age requirements, your these days you also need to have gender requirements, right? So you also need to have gender requirements because we have a law now forbidding heterosexual or sorry same-sex marriages. So we have a law forbidding same-sex marriages. So definitely you would need to be to have the gender requirement that the two people who want to get married are of opposite sex. So you need that. You need the age requirements, you need the consent requirement, and you also need the requirement that you are single and you have never been married before. I want to say thank you so much for joining me this evening on Your Family Lawyer. Next week, Tuesday, I'll be back. I want you to share this episode with your friends so that they'll be able to learn the same thing that you have learned. And not just that, if you have any legal questions, please consult a lawyer or you can reach out to me using the details on this particular episode. And once again, I would like to remind you that the things that I share here do not, they are not legal advice, right? So don't take them as such. It is I, Alright Eigbe, your favorite divorce and family lawyer, and also a counseling psychologist from the ancient and modern city of Ibadan. I want to say, have a great time. You rock.